Altered Carbon is a Netflix IP based on a series of books by Richard Morgan. Now, with 2 TV series and an anime film spin-off, the show is set in the distant future where human consciousness is stored in devices called stacks implanted in the neck, which can be transported into other bodies, called sleeves. This means that the death of the body is no longer the end unless your stack is destroyed, referred to in the show as real death. Both the aesthetic and the themes of the show are very reminiscent of Blade Runner, which may be part of the reason I enjoy it so much. Also, Joel Kinnaman. I've been really trying, baby. Many of the concepts explored within are fascinating, in my opinion, and worth exploring. Before we do so though, I would like to add a spoiler warning for the show, and would heavily recommend watching it. It's definitely worth the time, and let's be honest, you don't have anything better to do right now. The most obvious concept within is the not-so-subtle allegory that the uber-wealthy meths present. It shows an interesting and hyperbolized class struggle between meths who can clone themselves and to whom even real death means very little, and the lower class who sometimes can't even afford an appropriate sleeve, shown in the first season, when a literal child is put into a middle-aged sleeve. Now obviously this is problematic, but even more so when we consider that in the show, these sleeves could have debilitating addictions or traumatic sleeve memories. Imagine a middle-aged sleeve with the mind of a 7-year-old and a heroin addiction. Actually, that sounds kind of funny.
Man, fuck them kids, bro.
In the show, one of the characters says that you can pay for an upgraded sleeve, but it's presented as an option most people can't afford. In this instance, we have to question why this is the case. Cloning sleeves is very possible, as meths have vaults full of clones if one of their sleeves happen to be destroyed. Why can't the government do this for regular people? We aren't shown in the show how resource intensive it is to clone someone, but we are shown that at the bare minimum, all you need is organic material and a 3D printer capable of printing clones, which for some reason is illegal. We can speculate from the existing information that it is relatively easy to clone someone, and so once again, why don't they? Wouldn't it be cheaper for hospitals to clone people than to treat fatal illnesses, especially because they probably have an excess of organic material? The backing up of stacks also seems incredibly unethical, as if human consciousness can be stored on such a small device, why isn't it super easy to back up and not super expensive like it's presented to be in the show? Corporations in this universe are quite literally responsible for life and death, as both cloning and backing up are private enterprise. This presents a huge issue, as stack death seems easily avoidable and cloning seems fairly easy from what we're shown, both pointing towards an incredibly exploitative market. The second big philosophical idea in the show is criminal punishment. In this universe, punishment is served by being put on ice for a period of time, which consists of being sleeveless. While it's not extensively explained in the show, the assumption is that it's just like a long nap. The purpose of criminal punishment can be summed up by the 3 R's, 1 D, and 1 I of crime. Deterrence. A system should exist to frighten individuals against doing crime. Incapacitation. A system should stop an individual from doing more crime by removing them from society. Rehabilitation. A system should alter an individual's behaviour to stop them from doing crime in the future. Retribution. A system should deter individuals from committing crimes as vengeance and should instead satisfy the victim's desire for it. And finally, restitution. A system should punish the criminal financially to deter them from committing crimes in the future. The system in Altered Carbon is distinct enough from our current system that it is initially unclear whether it serves these purposes. We have no idea whether any sort of restitution or fine is inflicted, but it certainly acts as incapacitation, as not having a body severely restricts an individual's ability to do crime. Most of the characters in the show regularly do commit crimes though, with meths especially seeming mostly immune to the law, so as a deterrence it seems not great. Although admittedly this is speculation, it seems most individuals aren't afraid of going on ice. And why should they be? Even as retribution, it seems the punishment is not that severe. Going on ice for long periods of time only punishes the individual by alienating them from society, and the amount of time served seems mostly arbitrary. In the instance where we do see a criminal punished, it seems that it doesn't stop personal vengeance either, and the threat of going on ice certainly doesn't stop Ortega from killing Mr. Lung at the end of Season 1. This system also completely fails at rehabilitation, as we can assume that the criminals aren't interacted with during their time on ice and are functionally unconscious. This is the biggest red flag for the system, because the consensus is that in terms of preventing instances of reoffence, rehabilitation is the most effective. This is opinion based though, so I encourage you to form your own opinion on this point. So with arguably the most important factor missing and a generous tally of 1.5 out of 5, it's not looking great for the system in Altered Carbon. For severe crimes like double sleeving, uploading the same consciousness into 2 sleeves, the death penalty is enforced, but while I once again encourage you to come to your own conclusion, the death penalty is usually very inhumane, and at the moment in the US the rate of wrongful executions is as high as 4%, although admittedly we don't see an example of how it's done in the show. Overall though, it doesn't look good. The system seems not only inefficient, but also straight up ineffective at deterring crime. On top of this, the chief of police literally says in the show that the police is mostly useless, and the evidence backs this up, as neither of the instances of double sleeving that we see in the show even go punished. The last big idea in the show is religion versus stacks. We see 2 examples of modern day religion in the show. Samir Abood is a Muslim, but his beliefs on resleeving aren't remarkable, and we also won't be discussing Mr. Lung's beliefs. The focus is on Neo-Catholicism, because they actively oppose resleeving in the show. Now, I won't be discussing this point because it's pretty much subjective whether an individual wants to be resleeved or not. The ethical issue here is what they call religious coding, which stops an individual from being resleeved. Now obviously, for people who don't want to be resleeved, it does its job, and tells police and the like that an individual, no matter what, doesn't want to be brought back. However, it does seem to do more harm than good, as we are shown, as it acts as a major plot point in Season 1 that this coding can be faked, and is done so by the main villain, which lets her get away with countless murders. In this situation, it's kind of a pros versus cons situation. For the pros, it means that religious wishes are honoured. It also falls in line with the objective of our protagonist Kovac throughout the show, telling us that resleeving after death is ultimately bad. On the flip side are the cons. As I said before, the coding can be faked, which means bad things for people who aren't religious and die forever if their sleeve does. Children born to Neo-Catholics also automatically have the coding.
Man, fuck them kids, bro.
In my opinion, any physically enforced opinion is bad, and this means that until they reach adulthood, children cannot renounce their coding. Also, the coding can be renounced, which means that if someone wanted to resleeve a Catholic unethically, we can assume that there are resources which can achieve this. It seems like a really bad idea for this kind of thing to be allowed without some kind of registry which would keep fake coding from happening. Now, with these examples out of the way, we can try and answer the question that the show seems to be asking us. Is the stack technology ethical? Now, to preface this segment, I want to say that this is not a discussion about whether extending lifespans is ethical, but rather whether the technology used to do so is. Our protagonists tell us no. Kovac was part of Kelchrist Falconer's rebellion, which tried to forcibly stop people from being able to resleeve, so we'll assume that this is the show's stance as a whole. But for argument's sake, we'll also prevent the case for resleeving. We've already shown that many of the issues in the show do present ethical problems, with corporations proving incredibly exploitative of stack technology, prison systems not working, and religious coding being deeply flawed. On the flip side, the benefits of stacks are also fairly clear. It allows criminals to be caught more easily, as murder victims can be resleeved in order to testify, and lifespans for those who die young are able to be extended, which is good. Imagine if any of the 1.35 million road casualties every year weren't so fatal. That would be unquestionably a positive. It also allows humankind to advance beyond the means of mortality. Long-distance space travel is now easy, and needle casting is possible, allowing stack information to be broadcast almost anywhere, almost instantly, practically eliminating the need to physically travel. This technology also hopefully means that humans are generally wiser and more intelligent, simply by merit of longer lifespans and more life experience. Although obviously this won't be true 100% of the time.
Oh no!
It also seems like discrimination isn't a big issue in this world, as when you're just a USB in a meat suit, things like gender, race, and sexual orientation are all kind of irrelevant. Throughout the 2 seasons, Kovacs himself is Asian, Asian again, white, woman, and black. Being resleeved is just spinning the wheel of ethnicity.
Oh no!
On first glance, the viewer probably thinks, obviously this is good, and with the arguments laid out, I can see even still how the positives might outweigh the negatives. There's also a strong possibility that what we see in the show is dystopian, and the system would be completely different if applied to actual human society. However, my judgment call following all this is that stacks aren't good. The positives are undoubtedly positive, but I personally can't see them outweighing the negatives. It allows an even greater wealth disparity than we see in modern society, and I really strongly believe that allowing corporations the control that they have in the show is really bad, as well as the other problems that I've laid out. As I said, I can see both sides, but personally I think the show is right to dissuade us from wanting this kind of technology, and there may even be extra risks that we don't see in the show. If you disagree or have any hot takes that I missed, I encourage you to leave them in the comments. And as I said at the start, I would strongly recommend watching this. It's on Netflix, and putting all the ethical issues aside, I think it's a really great show. In any case, thanks for watching.